Well, hello everybody and welcome to the first of our autumn webinars for 2023. I'm Catherine Stothart, the Director of Events for the British Association for Psychological Type. And although we are the British APT, we are delighted that some of our international colleagues regularly join us for these webinars. So that's really good. Quick reminder, we've got other webinars coming up. At the end of this session, I'll show you a slide with dates and so on. But the most important thing to remember to bear in mind is that we have our annual conference again in April next year, 19th and 20th of April. And we're very excited that we're going to run an in-person workshop in London again next year on the 14th and 15th of June. So there's lots happening in the type world at the moment. So look out for details on our website, in Typeface, in e-news, on our social media about all our various events. So I'm delighted tonight to welcome Lynne Stewart, who's a new speaker for us. So it's really nice to have a new face. She's joining us from Toronto in Canada, and she's going to be talking about constitution, consciousness, and choosing balance. She is a coach and advisor and also works with Pilates and yoga and so on. And she's creating a framework that blends the science of Ayurveda with the philosophy around right brain and left brain thinking and so on. I'm not going to try and explain it any more than that because I'm going to hand you over to Lynne, who will explain it in much better and more interesting detail than I can. We're a small group, so if you want to interrupt or ask questions at any point, feel free. I think that's it. So Lynne, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. And thanks everyone for coming in this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. So the topic today is constitution, consciousness, and choosing balance. And I just want to walk through those words briefly so we're all on the same page. Constitution, of course, is used in a couple different ways. The way that Ayurveda is understanding constitution is really reflecting personality and temperament. And it's kind of the manifestation or result of energies in us, energies around us, and I will get into that. So that's constitution, and we're all kind of in search of understanding our own constitution. Consciousness, the way I'm using this is the idea of having awareness of who we are, which is, very along the lines of personality type, but also having some conscientiousness about who we are and accountability or responsibility for how we're showing up in the world. And then we go to choosing balance. And you might be like, well, that's an obvious thing to choose. But in our world, as we look around, it's not what people are choosing. They're choosing ambition, they're choosing power, they're choosing greed. They're choosing things that are very not in alignment with a balanced approach to your own self, your life. So choosing balance, it really is a choice. And I think we tend to move towards making good choices when we start to understand more the strategies to get us there, and some agreement with our communities that that's a good thing to pursue. Right Brain Wealth has come together from some of my experiences. There's some research and sort of philosophical framing that's coming out of the UK, funny enough, with brain damaged patients. And it's just demonstrating that our society and culture might be moving towards too much of a left brain kind of thinking, which kind of pursues individual, goals and focus over the greater good. And right brain wealth, on the other hand, is a far more human, holistic, measuring the impact of our choices kind of philosophy. So that's where right brain wealth came in. And it's also trying to elevate a little bit of the female energy and consciousness that we hope can move all of us into a sort of more kinder, gentler kind of space. So, sorry, 1 second here. I seem to be stuck. Why am I stuck here? Okay. Sorry, my slides are not moving forward, but I'll get there.
Yeah, don't worry. We've got plenty of time.
Okay, good. It's just being a little funny.
And I can tell everybody the slides were working fine when we came on.
There we go. Okay, good. So it is working now. So a brief introduction then. Lynne Stewart, the J is there because there are some other Lynne Stewarts in this world who've done some really crazy, awful things, and I'm not them. So the J is there, so you can find me on LinkedIn easily. And my background, I have a psych undergrad. I went into the corporate world and ended up doing a lot of leadership and development work there, and was always really seeking a way to not just make people successful, but make them happy and, healthy, and make them kind of feel like the work they were doing was filling them back up and not depleting them, which is a really important principle in Ayurveda. From there, I went on and ran my own business, which was a Pilates studio for 15 years, but we really brought in a lot of sort of overall mind body framing and thinking to the community. We were, aiming to create a safe space, looking to meet our clients where they were at. And through the work that I did in that studio, I really started to understand and become a little bit more intuitive about people and how they were showing up, and some of the imbalance or dysfunction that might be, systemic in their life. And so when Ayurveda really came full focus for me, I started to make all these connections between Ayurvedic ideas and some of the people that I was working with. So the final piece of my background is I worked in the wealth industry. And this is an area where we're not creating success and opportunities as much for everybody. And so I'm just trying to frame out something that elevates ideas that are more receptive, to women. And so that's where the right brain wealth has come in. But of course, it's really just more meant to be a more human framework, and the pursuit of things that lead us to a healthy life, a life aligned with our values. So let's get into it. Is it moving? Here we go. Okay. So, of course, we're all very well aware of the mental health crisis out in our world. It's really escalated since COVID, of course. But what I want to show you here is that they've done this study, and they do delineate between these three states of mental health issues: depression, anxiety, and stress. And you can see, even when you see them represented in the population, it's kind of a 30-30-30 split. And so what I want us to take away from this is, first, that depression, anxiety, and stress are different things, even though they do get clustered together. Sometimes people will say stress, caused anxiety, stress caused depression. But as we delve into Ayurveda, I just want you to understand that there's a delineation here that can be important in understanding temperament and vulnerabilities. And the second thing that is important here, and this is more of a personal perspective of mine, is that sometimes depression, anxiety, and stress kind of become a label for people. So it's a label, it validates how they're feeling, but at times they hide behind it. And what Ayurveda says is no. Depression, anxiety, and stress is not, it's not a place that you stay. It's the manifestation of imbalance. And if we come back to balance, then the same energy that's creating depression, anxiety, and stress can actually create more constructive and more fulfilling types of energies in us, like creativity, like stability, like focus. So those are the dark side of different constitutions. And then there's a light side, which is a more productive, constructive place that we want people to get to. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so Ayurveda is said to be the science of life. So it was developed in India over 5,000 years ago, and they call it a sister science to yoga. And Ayurveda has, a lot of ways that you can delve into it. You can go very deep into it. There are medical journals that are Ayurvedic. But there's also just some very basic building blocks that anybody can get their head around. You can, adopt some simple sort of strategies in your life that are based on an understanding of your constitution from an Ayurvedic standpoint. So it can be very simplistic, and you can dig down into the layers over time if you find parts of this compelling to you. So, understanding Ayurveda, first we need to talk about elements or energies. And that starts with ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So, those are the elements. And of course, we're all well aware that these energies in our world have impact, they do different things. The doshas then become this place like vata would be a blend of ether and air, and pitta would be a blend of fire and water, and then kapha would be a blend of water and earth. I don't know if you've heard of doshas before. It's a bit more of a common term in the mind body world, but the premise here is that our constitution is made up of a blend of the doshas. So we might have a predominant sort of pitta dosha in our constitution, and we'll have a little bit of vata and a little bit of kapha. And this probably all sounds super confusing, like another language, but just so we understand, these are the building blocks, and we'll get into some of the layman terms and manifestations of these things. But just so we understand, elements are making up the doshas. Doshas are making up the constitution. We are very unique in our constitution. And I have a little picture of a baby because our constitutions are actually determined basically from an Ayurvedic standpoint at conception. And it's something that stays as our temperament for life. And whether or not we are creating a lifestyle that honors our constitution and keeps us aligned with what our true constitution is, well, those are the choices that we get to make over time. Confused yet? Hopefully not. Good. Okay. So the doshas, which we talked about, are manifesting a certain type of behavior or activity. So vata is air, ether, or wind. So vata is basically movement. And movement occurs physically in our bodies. The colon is the seat of vata. So there's movement in the colon. So there's a real physical representation of it. But from a mental or psychological energy, vata is also creating, creativity and inspiration and momentum. And anyone who's got a lot of vata in them will come into a space and they kind of charge it up, right? They're creating a lot of energy around a group, and they'll be very chatty and very, engaging. And so that is somebody with a high amount of vata, which is fantastic because, a lot of us need people around us that help to vibe us up, give us more momentum, inspire us. And vatas also are creative. And I always like to think of creativity as, it's something that operates without constraints in a lot of situations. And vatas really do seem to live their lives without a lot of constraints on what they're doing. So oh, yeah, Nathan, did you want to ask a question? Please.
Yeah, so I'm was wondering about ether and what is, if you could speak to what ether is and how that contributes to vata, because I'm personally aware of the four of those five elements: air, fire, earth, and water. Not as familiar with ether. Yeah.
So the nuances are there for sure. I'm not going to go too much into those nuances of the five elements, but like I said, like we can stay in those building blocks, basics. Overall, when you get into the nuances of those two energies that make up a constitution, you really do start to understand some of the things that might be out of balance in you. And this is what an Ayurvedic practitioner would do, is they would kind of be like, so kapha is a blend of earth and water, let's just say. And earth is very rooted and water is very flowing and resilient, right? And so at times, you'll meet someone who's predominantly kapha, and they seem to have more ability to go with the flow, right? Whereas another kapha who has a more, earth predominant kapha energy, they might be more stoic and stubborn, right? So the ether air element, in all honesty, like it's the nuances are important when you start to go down and drill down into Ayurveda. But yeah, if that kind of gives you an idea of those ideas, but definitely dig into that research and see if some of it resonates for you. If you we'll have you first go through and do your doshic sort of quiz, and then it all drills down into those elements. Yeah. Does that help?
Awesome. Thank you. That definitely helps. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. So Pitta is fire, or as we saw before, fire and water. And fire is transformative. So people who have a high element of Pitta are basically very passionate, visionary, focused, intellectual. A lot of doctors and lawyers would have a lot of Pitta energy in them. And they are strategic. They're always trying to sort of motivate people towards a goal, and they're creating the framework. So you take Vata's creativity without constraints, and then Pitta would take that sort of information and they would say, now let's solve a problem with that. And let's move forward on understanding how to solve this problem. And they would make it more goal oriented. So Pitta's fire is transformative and catalyzing to status quo that is out there. So getting to status quo, the kapha energy, which is made up of fire and made up of water and earth, they tend to create a lot of stability in any sort of space that they're in. And they have a level of consistency that they bring to their work. They work well within structure. They like to follow rules. They like process. They are the foundation. They are that safe space. And you can always sort of count on a kapha sort of like just maintaining status quo for you in any situation. And so that's just an introduction then to the doshas, and just bearing in mind that our own constitution will blend all of these things. So I, for instance, have a high representation of Pitta in my constitution. I also have some of the Vata elements in my constitution. And so what I do in life is I try to cultivate strategies and practices that elevate kapha energy in me, right? So I look for, an approach to life that gives me a little bit more grounding and stability. Start to make sense? Okay. So Vata dosha, just to take you through it again, it's energy, creativity, inspiration, movement, momentum, encouragement. And sometimes the Vata dosha does all of this, but doesn't necessarily have focus or direction or goal, right? So Vata can start to look a little bit wild and chaotic at times as well, just depending on the context within which a person is living their day, or inputs that they're bringing into their body can disrupt the Vata dosha so that it's not so constructively manifesting, in that it's not creative and inspirational. It starts to become more chaotic, and that can lend sort of the Vata dosha going towards true imbalance, which is, the idea of anxiety, panic attacks. So the Pitta dosha, we'll get there. My system's a little slow. Oh, okay. So Pitta, again, as I mentioned, there's, they're passionate, they're strategic, they're transformative, they're goal-oriented. And so again, depending on the setting, the context, and the inputs coming into a Pitta person, they can stay constructively, part of a system or an environment or an organization. But if the Pitta dosha is overrepresented or over manifesting, then it can move towards conflict or stress or anger, or it might look like they've just started to control everything. And that's different than the constructive, framing of focusing people, giving them goals, motivating them. So you can see how the same dosha can be good or bad, right? There's a good side and a dark side to it. And I think that's very empowering to sort of understand that, as much as stress might be manifesting, if we, develop some strategies and a little bit of our toolkit to say like, oh, how do I chill this Pitta dosha out and get back to what is constructive and positive? you know, we really do have the opportunity to bring the best version of ourselves forward. So the Kapha dosha, these are our earth people. They're stable. They are calm. They are slow and methodical. They have a lot of strength. Their strength is enduring. There's a lot of consistency in how they do things. They're very reliable. And so, you know, when you look at the three doshas, yes, our constitution may represent some blend of the three of them, but individuals that we know, you'll just start to intuitively be like, oh, that person must have strong kapha dosha. There's a physicality to it. So when you do a dosha quiz, they ask questions about your body frame and, you know, your movement patterns and, you know, how you deal with money and how you socialize, what color your hair is, what color your eyes are, your lips, what do they look like? There's a real physicality to it, but then there's also some deeper questions that just help you and understand sort of the more behavioral temperament elements of each dosha. Any questions? Nope. Okay. So my ideas here is like, how do we use this knowledge when we sort of talk about our leadership traits, our role on a team, or the choices we're making about the career path that we're going to take? And as I said, you know, pittas are typically predominantly like doctors and lawyers. Vata people, they might be, you know, very much the artists and creatives in our world. And then kaphas might be more like project managers, people who are, you know, creating process and structure and framing in every situation that we need that in. So the leadership for a Vata is their ability to maintain momentum and to cheer others on and keep things kind of light and moving. You know, I look at organizations and I look at the people who are in leadership, and I always assess their constitution and think like, what is it that is their gift? Like, what is it that they're bringing to the organization? And is there a balance in terms of, you know, the team being able to bring a mix of everything so that the ecosystem that comprises all of these doshas is creating balance across the doshas. Focus, of course, is coming from somebody who's got predominantly pitta in their constitution. So they're visionary, they're strategic, transformative. They keep people focused. They build a lot of, you know, resilience and future thinking into how they lead. And then the third is the kapha's form of leadership. And they're creating, of course, safe space and stability and reliability. And, you know, as I talk through these things, I mean, personally, when I'm working in an organization where a leader is bringing a lot of that kapha energy to the mix, that helps me to flourish. And then there's other people who are going to flourish more because of the momentum that somebody brings into the mix. And just, again, starting to develop awareness of who we are and who are the people around us, we, you know, that might be a nice fit, or we might need to figure out strategies in our toolkit that start to represent across the three doshas so that the whole system is balanced and can create you know, an effective platform for everyone to do their best. What do you think so far? Are these some ideas that kind of resonate for you?
I think it's really interesting, actually, but of course I'm sitting here thinking, well, that's the stability. That sounds a bit like the stabilizer temperament. But then I'm trying to work out, well, the other two, I mean, I have some ideas, but I want there to be 4, not 3. And I'm thinking, why didn't they come up with 4 doshas instead of 3?
That's hilarious. I know, it's true. And all the framing in Ayurveda, there's 3 seems to be the magic number, because there's even, you know, different states that we can go into, which is sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, and there's 3. Yeah. So we can be calm, or we can be kind of raging, or we can be lazy.
But I love seeing these different links between different frameworks, because it feels like there must be some truth somewhere, and all these different approaches are trying to get to, you know, the truth. And it's nice to see some of the same themes coming through, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I dare bring this in, but one framework that comes to mind is the astrological framework, actually. And one of the concepts they have for the 12 signs, because it's 12, 3 times 4, but the 3, they have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And if I were to, associate or correlate some of these with perhaps these doshas, I would see Vata as being more cardinal, Kapha as being more fixed, and Pitta being more Pitta being more cardinal, and Vata being more mutable. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think trying to figure out, for me, like when I look at new programs that come out, I try to always understand it from an Ayurvedic standpoint, because new diets will come out, new approaches to things will come out. I'm like, well, who exactly is that going to work for, right? So yeah, I'm totally with you. There's a lot of them out there. Okay, let me see if this slide will move forward. Sure has a mind of its own. So then how do we manage around our constitution? So if we, as I talked about for myself, I mean, being predominantly Pitta with a layer of Vata, that's internal to me, intrinsic to me. So I'm always trying to consciously bring in practices that are going to elevate the kapha energy in my world. So I don't, I treasure the things that keep me safe and foundational in my life. And I know that if I don't cultivate that sort of calm foundational element in my world, it'll throw everything else into disarray. I also know, like, travel, for instance, is very vata provoking. So travel is, you're up in the air, you're moving around, you're not settled anywhere. So the vata constitution or the vata energy really gets elevated, which can, make you talk faster, look a little bit, chaotic, and lead to anxiety. So when you start to understand the different contexts and inputs that might throw some of this out of balance, it's awesome to have that awareness. And then now you just develop a practice that says, okay, I'm gonna try to root. I'm gonna try to, like, get more connected to the earth below me, to the foundation below me, and breathe into it and just try to bring my sense of balance back in before I move on to the next thing.
Mm.
Oh yeah, Jerry.
I really like that, and I think it just made me reflect on the way in which psychological type, which obviously the core model for the BAPT is, like, it's so often wrongly used to kind of limit people, when actually it should be used for exactly the kind of thing you've just been talking about. How do I then, if I prefer thinking, how then do I connect with my feeling function? Or if I prefer intuition, as I personally do, how do I make sure that I'm grounded enough with my sensing? So I think that kind of dynamic is very similar, isn't it?
Thank you. I mean, that is exactly what I mean. Is, like, rather than a label that creates kind of a static, fixed kind of space that you're in, and almost like this is who I am. This is why I talked about the concept of consciousness, which is, awareness and conscientiousness, and looking for ways to rebalance yourself so that you bring the best of yourself to the world, and understand what are the things that throw you out of balance. So yeah, that exactly, you're exactly right. And I did a session many years ago, and I was bringing forward this framework and spoke to a girl who'd been diagnosed clinically depressed. And it was a label that she, that validated how she felt, first off, but she stood behind it. And I said, well, what if depression is just the manifestation of an energy you have, but that energy could manifest in a positive, constructive way too? It took a little fighting to get her to think about it, right? Because she was really attached to what it was doing to validate her feelings. And it just opened her mind up. Like, she came up to me after, she said, oh my gosh, like, this just changed everything I'm doing around this framing of this depression that I'm dealing with, right? So thank you. Yeah. So developing awareness, these are just some ideas that first off, of course, you do a dosha quiz, and you can find these dosha quizzes all over the internet. But I prefer Joyful Belly's approach because it lets you come in at a very basic level, and then it just takes you down into all these layers, right? Tons and tons of layers. So you can go as sort of layered down as you want to start to understand how your specific constitution and the doshas in your constitution are creating who you are. And also, we do have energy not just in us but around us. So in Canada, we get a lot of cold winters, and cold wind air is going to elevate the vata energy, not just for somebody with vata, but for everybody. So, seasons really have a cycle that we have to be conscious of in the context of our own constitution. And we just lean into some strategies then that are supportive. So summertime, crazy hot days, you need to keep your body cool. So what are you eating, right? In the springtime, it's really a moist time. There's a lot of rain. There's a lot of sort of thickness in the ground and stuff. So what are you doing to manage all of this sort of extra watery element that's not just, that's in everybody at that point in time? So your dosha quiz, Joyful Belly, is a great place to start. The Chopra Center in California is also, they also have a quiz. And sometimes it's very simplistic how they do these quizzes. The thing that's important is if the quiz were to ask me if I'm blonde or brunette, I have to think about whatever bottle I've used on my hair, right? And so I might be like, I'm blonde, but maybe in reality, I'm not totally blonde. So our first gut response to a lot of these questions is going to be more about like where I'm at today. But in truth, as you go away and you think of the questions, you're going to want to say, oh, no, like, what's my more typical response? What is it that keeps showing up for me on good days, on bad days, not just the day I did the quiz? So you'll actually come back to the quiz and you'll start to answer the questions a little more intuitively. They actually say that your parents would be the best person to answer all the quizzes because they know exactly what you did before you had all your filters. So that's just kind of giving you some framing for, because you'll go through the quizzes and it's not precise, but the key thing is to learn something from it and learn the 2 or 3 things that might be triggers for you, be it food or environment or framing. Learn some of the things that, really put you in a good space. Learn the things that create more vulnerability for you. And you'll know those things, like they'll resonate for you as you start to understand how, food affects us, how our sleep affects us, how the time that we wake up affects us, and how the work that we're doing affects us, or the fitness that we're doing affects us. I mean, personally, I'm not someone who can work out early in the morning. It actually depletes me. And Ayurveda is really all about not depleting the body, but creating a space where the body feels stronger and more energized from the play or work that you're doing. So those are just some ideas. Chopra, you can do their quiz as well. I've put links in the end of this for those 2 sites. So from a contextual standpoint, not just what's in us, but what are we taking in? And that can be the food we eat, the air we breathe, the noise we're listening to, things that we're smelling around us, touch, like all the senses and how that draws stuff into us is important. And so becoming more aware of what the best inputs are for you and what are sort of the irritants is important to staying in balance, staying centered, and being able to sort of continue to manifest the best version of you. Environments, cities, the suburbs, out of town, in nature, in the basement, like all the different environments we can be in and how important they are to you. So just a quick comment on that. A Vata person will often create a space that might look a little busy, chaotic. There might be almost more of a pragmatic sense to everything that's in their environment, right? Things have a function, and but there's a lot of stuff around a Vata. A Vata have piles of stuff at times, right? There's an element of chaos in an environment that they might live in. A Pitta sort of values aesthetically pleasing stuff that keeps them calm. So they'll create spaces that are harmonious for them, but not necessarily, they're not all about a pragmatic environment or a functional environment. And they might not have a lot of stuff around them, really. And then a Kapha, a Kapha can be in a bad place, you'll see hoarding going on for a Kapha. And in a good place, Kaphas do build, right? They're builders. That's what they do. They build their foundation, and they're building kind of spaces for people to be in. They are the ones that create the walls around us, create the structure around us. So environments, as you again start to look at your own environment and the spaces that you like to create for yourself, a lot of it is pivoting off of your constitution. Strategies, I just like to think of eat, sleep, and play. So what are you eating? First thing in the morning, I think the way that you start your morning is everything. Like, if you start your morning well and in alignment with what's best for you, you can navigate almost any disruption during your day. So mornings are really important. A Vata tends to wake very early. This is also the time of day that's very creative and inspiring. So waking early is a natural thing for someone with a high Vata energy. But any of us who wake up early, we will also be invigorated by the Vata time of day, and we'll find more inspiration and creativity early in the morning. Pittas, they tend to get a good night's sleep. So they'll pretty much get a solid 6 to 8 hours of sleep. And Kaphas are the people who tend to sleep in. So they'll sort of move past that sweet spot in the morning when, if they'd gotten up, they would have been just like revved up for the day. And if they sleep past that point, they're just stagnant and not energized for their day. So that's the sleep idea. And then the play idea this is really important. I think this is actually the thing that we have to really create consciousness about. So for a Vata, because Vatas are always on the move, they wake early, they wake up and hit the ground running, they're bouncing off the walls. That's how they do their lives. If that type of momentum spirals during the day for them, they will experience anxiety. And that can then go through to like panic attacks. So what's the opposite of movement? Stillness. So for a Vata who is finding their days getting really strung out, they're getting anxious at some point in the day, if they were to cultivate a practice in the morning that finds stillness in their neurological system, their stress or anything that kind of activates the nervous system in a split second. But cultivating stillness and creating a memory in our neurological system for what stillness feels like, if a Vata does that in the morning, it's almost like during the day they can invoke it, consciously invoke it. So this is why I see this mental health crisis that we're having, and I'm like, oh gosh, if we could just start to understand a few of these simple strategies that might support, maybe solve, it just depends on how far in people are and things like that. But there's ways of managing these things beyond just labeling it and maybe however people are approaching it. So the Vata, their play in the morning should be very much about stillness. And then you have Pitta. So Pitta, I told you, they're very focused, passionate, thinking all the time. And they're kind of in control of everything, right? Like when they really get revved up, they are going towards this idea of controlling everything. So the opposite of control is surrender. So for a Pitta, first thing in the morning, if they can manifest play or movements outside, I think is, in nature is the best place. And just, mantra would be just, think of surrendering. And I think when you get out into this, into nature, you kind of look around, you're like, oh yeah, there's no way I'm controlling all of this. Definitely need to surrender. So for a Pitta, surrendering in the morning is key. For a Kapha, the risk for them is lethargy and stagnation. So their mornings need to be energizing. And so their play first thing in the morning is just to rev up their energy, be it, dancing, jumping, running, something intense like that. And that can really bring balance in believe it or not, it's actually that simple, right? It's just movements can really rev up a Kapha's energy, and surrender can really center a Pitta energy, and stillness can really calm and ground a Vata energy. So the dosha quiz, as I said, it asks a lot of questions. It'll ask about your body type, your weight, what your sleep is like, stamina. So a Kapha could go out and run a marathon, but a Pitta should not run a marathon. That just really creates a lot of Pitta activation in them. Speech, do you talk fast? Emotions, this just brings us back to things like anxiety, anger, depression, all the emotions that we can experience. So the quiz will ask about what emotions manifest for you. And it'll ask about sort of your social circle. So do you have do you sort of bounce around friend to friend? And that's very Vata-like. They'll make friends and then move on and make new friends. Pittas, will sort of create like a strategic circle around them. And then wealth, this is, this line aligns with the last bit of work that I did, which was in the wealth industry. And there's a whole new division of the wealth industry popping up, which is called financial therapy. And Ayurveda can help you understand how you view wealth and money. So a Vata, they keep things in motion, so they'll spend things as fast as they earn it, right? So they don't stop to count. They just keep moving it. They buy, they earn, they buy, they earn. No plan for the future. Everything is just like in the moment. Then you have a Pitta, and Pittas are so strategic and so visionary that they believe they can make all the money they need tomorrow. And so they don't need to do anything about it today. They just always believe that they can, get the money they need to get. And they'll also be inclined to spend money on luxuries because they like beautiful things around them. So that's how they're using and seeing money. And then Kaphas, they're your nest builders. So they are putting money away every week, consistent, reliable. They build, they actually amass the most wealth on average just because they have that very structured, consistent approach to it. And then climate. So we talked about seasons. So how does the cold affect you? How does heat affect you? And rainy days or dry days are all going to affect our unique constitutions. And there's just strategies that we can then start to cultivate. Yes, Nathan.
Yeah, I was wondering, the list there that you show with the quiz, are those separate quizzes, or does the quiz combine all of these factors into one outcome or result? Because if so, I think that would be so fascinating and sort of unique amongst, quizzes for different personality systems, in that this factors into both internal and external factors on our situation. Yeah.
I love that. This is so great to get this perspective from people who've been in the sort of assessment world for years. So yeah, one quiz will integrate all those things. And, you're never just one dosha. So you might have, a physique that reflects, Vata, but you'll have other elements that reflect Pitta. And that's how you get the blending of these two things. But yeah, they're all together in the quiz, the physical and psychological.
Yeah. No, I think if if it could relate back to Jung, I think he talked about the personal and the collective, yeah, and how the consciousness and unconscious can of both can interact, yeah, yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a great science. Like every time I, read more information on it, it really resonates, and it gives you constructive strategies to integrate into your whole life, right? So yeah, so some inputs that can have impact: cold food, hot food, and heavy food. Sleep, as I talked about, you've got people who are early risers, those are your vatas. You've got people who are late to bed, and those are the pittas. So pitta is also the energy that exists within the liver, and the liver, pitta, intellect, focus, they all link together. So a pitta is that person who's up late doing all their work, right? Because that's when their mind, it really starts to focus in on information. But from a health standpoint, if you're not getting to bed at a reasonable hour as a pitta, you're not restoring your liver, right? You're not giving it time to heal every day. So again, you start to become more aware of the choices you're making, and hopefully choose health over ambition as a pitta, or just ideas like that. So and late to wake up, those are your kaphas. Kaphas are phenomenal if you get them on a schedule. And kaphas are phenomenal if you structure their day, get them on a schedule, get them up early, doing something rigorous, or connecting socially, right? So for a kapha to have a social connection early in the morning really lends itself well to how their day unfolds and how their mood unfolds. And so the play, like I said, a kapha would look for maybe endurance activities, and a pitta, these play ideas are neither good nor bad. It's just an awareness that a vata will lean towards a vigorous activity. They're the runners. They're the ones out there running all the time. And they're not sure where they're running to or why they're running, but they run because they love movement. And pittas will, in an imbalanced way, pittas move towards competitive frameworks, when in reality, for a pitta just to focus on personal best is a healthier way for them to stay balanced, and not get sort of fired up in a pitta sort of way. Your kaphas, they're the ones who can get out there doing marathons, 3 and 4 hour bike rides, no problem at all. An endurance sport for them actually uses up a lot of that stamina and energy that they have in a positive way. Okay, let's see if this slide moves forward. There we go. So as I talked about, the seasons are going to impact the energies that manifest, not just for somebody with high pitta in the summer, but for everybody. So in the summertime, pitta is elevated, so we try to cool the body down. We cool it down with cold foods, raw foods, and sweet. Sweet is actually a cooling taste. And then in the fall, we have, a cooler, windier kind of energy showing up, which creates vata for all of us. So we might ourselves experience not just cold, but a little bit of anxiety. And I always love this thing about Ayurveda. They're like, in the fall, you just need to be at home. You need to nest and stay close to family, and stay warm, and not be sort of living those late nights that you did in the summer. It's just not good for your health. So I think that's just a really intuitive, interesting thing. And then in the wintertime, of course we want warmth, but now there's this word called anxious, which is oily energy. And so, some people say, oh, I'm dry, I'm dehydrated, I need water. But in fact, sometimes what it is that you need is more of that anxious energy. So oily substances can be really helpful as you're transitioning sort of fall to winter. And then in the spring, there's more water in the world and in the earth. And it's also a time where we cleanse the body of all the extra food that we eat in the winter. And so spring is a great time to detox your life, detox your body. And so that's kind of how seasonality fits into it. It's not a precise science, but it's really meant to help you create a little bit more intuition about not just like, oh, I'm stressed, but like, what's going on in my world that is manifesting as stress, right? And is there something I can do to dial it down a bit? Good. Are you guys finding this interesting?
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting how much of it is related to those natural cycles that we go through the year. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing about being in balance with creation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, entirely.
And I like the sort of mind-body link, or, you know, body, mind, spirit, that sort of bringing all the balance between all those different parts of a person, and what you need to do to look after all of them.
Isn't it true? Because we sometimes get so caught up in just the psychology of something that we forget, well, that person's been sitting all day. No wonder they're feeling anxiety. They need to move. And I recognize during the day as I'm working from home, I'm like, when my body is starting to kind of like, talk to me, I'm like, okay, it's because you need to get up and move around and settle, quell the anxiety, or, invigorate the body. So they all are so connected. So here we go. So just, reiterating the stuff that we've talked about, but just to keep reframing it in a way that makes sense to you. Vatas, they're on the move, they're chatty, they're busy, they are skinny, they wake up early, their energy levels are high. These are the people who have hobbies and projects and tasks going on all the time. I've got some friends who, retired, and they've got projects on every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wild to me. And it really drives them forward. They always have to have a task. They're the people who are knitting. They are the people who are doing puzzles, playing games. It's so Vata. Like when you start to understand, you're like, oh, this is entirely a Vata person. So from an eating perspective, you try to eat warm foods, grounding foods, like a sweet potato is very grounding and calming. Oatmeal is very grounding, simple stuff, right? And they're early risers. They really only get about 4 to 6 hours of sleep, but that's their constitution. But it's also important for them to, to lean in toward the 6 hours of sleep from a health standpoint. And their play, like I said, they are the runners. They love running, but they really need to also find a meditation practice that brings stillness to them. The Pittas are the intellects, the strategists, the thinkers. Often their best thinking is done late at night, which is the Pitta cycle of the day. They're always trying to transform and change and evolve things. So for Pitta, which is fire, they need to, cool down, stay grounded and calm, and they're best to get to sleep early. They will, usually get around 8 hours of sleep. And when they play, it should be done in moderation, not to depletion. And there should be a mindfulness in the approach that they take to, their play. Kaphas, they are those strong, grounded people in our lives. They are so good when there's schedule and structure around them. And when you take structure away from a kapha, they fall apart so fast. So kaphas, school's over there, it's the summertime. Oh my gosh, like those first 2 weeks till they get a little bit more structure around them, just, lazy, unproductive, and depressed. And then as soon as you put schedule back in for a kapha, they light back up again. So they're so predictable in that sense. They love structure. They're very process driven. They'll follow rules always. They'll support kind of staying where you are, status quo. And but they really bring a lot of reliability to any environment they're in. They're a safe space. There's, they're loyal. They're the nest builders. They're the community builders. They build. That's what they do. And so really important element in a stable world. So they should focus on creating lightness in their body and invigoration. So they're the ones putting all the hot sauce on their food, hopefully. Not the pittas, but you'll see pittas putting hot sauce on the food and you'll be like, not a good idea. But the kaphas, they're always, spicing it up. So ideally, if they can wake early, that's a solid approach to managing kapha. You wake early, you create structure in your life, phenomenal. And they lean into endurance sports, and their workout should happen early in the morning. So they should have a very rigorous workout early mornings to bring the best of themselves to the world. So Catherine and I were talking earlier, and I was just showing her this framing comes from 16 personalities, but also layers in the codes from Myers-Briggs. And I'm not perfect at understanding all of the alignments. It's just kind of having read through some of the bios and stuff and getting an idea of it. You can see how the personality types might also represent the blend of the doshas. So intuition and thinking, or the theorist, you can see how prevalent pitta is in that type.
I'm so glad you've shown this slide, Lynn, because while you've been talking, I've been thinking, I must be a pitta. I must be a pitta. And now I know that I am, because I'm on this slide.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah.
Which one are you? Which one are you, Catherine?
Well, my type is INTP, so the logician. But a lot of what you said about the pitta constitution, I've been thinking, yeah, I'm like that, I'm like that, I'm like that. So it's quite nice just to see, to see that connection, really.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then if we go to the next one second here. I think that jumped ahead. Okay, so okay, so the diplomats or the catalysts, we now see, predominant kapha. And you can see they're all, advocate to me probably has a strong pitta element, but known for empathy and diplomacy, idealism, right? There's, it's the diplomacy and the empathy that really is kapha aligned. The stabilizers, so this has a blend of kapha and pitta in it. They are, practical but focused on order, security, and stability. So, there's, to me, that speaks kapha, but you can see pitta is really showing up here as well.
And for me, that one just sounds, the kapha sounds so stabilizer. So I was surprised when you've linked it to the other ones, but anyway, yeah, I mean, obviously, I understand your framework, but yeah, everything you've said about kapha sounds to me like the stabilizer temperament.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Sorry, Jerry, go on. Yeah.
No, just agreeing with Catherine. I was thinking that as well, sort of earlier on as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the logic to me feels very pitta-like, and defender definitely. Yeah, I can see, and again, it's not a perfect sort of alignment here. I was more just trying to show how some of these doshas could represent within these types. But yeah, in general, it does feel very kapha. I agree. I think as I read through the individual framings, it just seemed to bring forward some of the other constitutions. But we can definitely reframe all these. And then the explorers are very vata, spontaneous, flexible, ingenious, definitely improvisers or explorers. I know there's two different sciences or two different frameworks here that are blending. So that is the Ayurvedic sort of framing. I think one of the ideas I wanted to bring forward is, if you think of organizations and businesses and where they're at in their business life cycle, if you have a Vata personality or a Vata energy creating without constraints in a certain situation, then that sort of creativity without constraints gets kind of, moved towards the Pitta energy, where they're now taking this idea and applying it to a problem and being strategic about how to use it. The business is cycling through from creative to strategic to structure. And when you get to this structured place in the business, you're going to create process and constraints and frameworks and, sort of a repeat mentality, right? We're not going to massage it anymore. We've created it. We figured out where it works. And here we go. Let's go do this. So I think in every business and industry, that cycle is apparent. And the people that you hire into your company through these different stages are going to reflect, hopefully, the stage that the business cycle is in. And as you get into that more stable, structured place in a business where, it's just, the same strategy being unfolded every time, the people who were creative, they have less of a role now in the company, or maybe they're the marketing person and now they're creating with constraints. Then you've got your strategist who might look more like almost like a risk to the company, right? Because they're not following the rules and they're not staying within the structure. Then you've got, businesses that sit within an industry where disruption is happening, but the businesses themselves are in this structured place. The people who are working in that company are very, connected to this sense of stability and status quo. And how do you get a company to shift and evolve and move into a new business cycle? It's very difficult, right? Because now you've got all these personalities that are invested in status quo. So I think what you see in a lot of industries is the creative energy is sitting outside of a lot of the companies that have created structure and constraints. So the creative energy sits outside. It then gets sort of attached to someone who's strategic, who can sort of bring it forward into a sort of practical application. And then I think what happens in a lot of businesses is they go and they buy this bit and they bring it in because they can't do it themselves. And I've listened to podcasts where they talk about innovating from within, and I'm just like, I don't think it can happen because I don't think anymore. I don't think you have the people that can do it. And even if you did, they're usually a small percentage of a business that is now, been working in this stable, structured format for who knows how long, right? There's so much entrenched in the business here. They can only go out, so there's that kind of framing, or there's the idea that you take all your structured people and you meet them at 6 a.m. for a really intense run. And you hope that you can kind of shift them into sort of being a little bit more pliable and, ready to make some change. So there's the physical and the psychological blending, is bring them all in for a big marathon, 6 a.m. So there's some links to these dosha quizzes. So I invite you guys to go and explore a little bit for yourself and see what sort of comes up for you if it's of interest to you. And that is the end of the presentation. Does anyone have questions or comments?
I have a question.
I guess that's okay.
I was just going to ask a question. If if folks that have traumatic brain injury, how that affects, does this change? Does it always remain the same?
It's, it's not a scientific kind of way to answer it, but, in general, the idea is the constitution is fixed at conception. But, you look at women who go through pregnancy and different traumas that happen in your life. So Ayurveda, it has something it's called Prakriti. So Prakriti is their word for like, who are you? What is your constitution? And then it says, what's your Vikriti? So where are you today because of different things that have happened or are being inputs into your life? And what they want to do is say, this is Vikriti, this is where you're at today, but your Prakriti is over here. And how do we bring you back to your true sense of true you, right? And so in Ayurveda, imbalance occurs along 5 levels of a spectrum. And the premise is that if your imbalance, say, is like level 1, you're going to have an instinct to, have some sweet potato to calm yourself down. Go and eat oatmeal in the winter. Your instincts and your intuition when you're just at a level 1 of imbalance is intuitive and appropriate. But if you don't solve for that imbalance and it goes beyond to level 2 and level 3, you're kind of in crisis. And now what's going to happen is the thing that will exacerbate that imbalance is what you go for. So, you'll start a kapha who shouldn't eat sugar in stage 2 or 3 of an imbalance. That's all they'll eat is sugar. Whereas in stage 1, they'll go for light foods and invigorating foods, right? So imbalance down the line. And that's why they do have Ayurvedic practitioners to sort of come in and say, like, there's your Prakriti, there's your Vikriti. Let's do some interventions that help to bring you back to more intuition. Brain injury, I mean, I think what you'll see there is there's probably a loss of natural intuition. And I would suspect that the choices they're making resemble the choices someone might make when they're at a level 2 or 3 of imbalance. But I mean, every brain injury is so different. And yeah, so, and I mean, Ayurveda also, like, they lean in on ideas of, serious health issues like cancers and, dementia and Parkinson's. Like they'll kind of explain that is this Vikriti and level of imbalance that has moved away from just that sort of, my analogy is if there's water coming up from the pipe in the sink and it's coming up into the sink, as long as it's in the sink, we're okay. But once it spills out over the sink and onto the carpet, we got a problem, right? And we don't even know where to begin to fix that. And that's kind of balance and imbalance in Ayurveda. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know the details of that, but yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I did some work years ago and it was on energy medicine, that kind of stuff. And they even talked about, what brings people to some of these diseases and stuff. And it's really imbalance in so many things.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And there's, subtleties to it. And there's sort of like a, in our world, we're kind of like, are you broken yet? We can't fix you till you're really broken. Right. And Ayurveda is like, well, let's be a little more nuanced and intuitive and let's not get to the breaking point. Yeah.
Nathan, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's about how to assess either a workplace, a colleague, or even perhaps someone you're dating or some group that you might want to join for as a hobby, for instance. Like, how are there methods for getting a vibe of like whether a group or a person is in balance or not in balance, or which of the doshas are more prevalent in an environment, or is the only way to or the best way is to just get involved with that thing, with that client or whoever, and then you'll learn through experience. Yeah.
Well, first off, I think I could create a dating site that would be highly effective, because I think that when you look at the people who come together, there's a balance of energies that's happening. And I would say the framework is be in a balanced state, get together, right? So know each other when you're both in a balanced state. A lot of dysfunctional are going to happen when there's an out of balance, and coming together creates sort of a dysfunctional balancing, right? I think a lot of relationships break down when one person ends up in an imbalanced place, right? So there's a lot to be said around, what you're drawn to and what balances you out. And it's not necessarily that you're just drawn to people who are like you. You're actually drawn to people who, you synergistically fit together, right? In the workplace, I actually think there's certain roles that really are better performed by certain people. And I think the context, constraints, no constraints that surround different people and roles is really important too. And I think if you have the wrong sort of doshic energy in certain roles, you're just asking for trouble, right? And you're just not going to get, great results from that situation. But all that to say that if you come into a situation with empathy and awareness for other people's approach to things, I think that in itself is going to lend itself to more successful relationships. So just understanding that, a kapha person is going to bring a lot of structure and is going to thrive on a lot of structure. And a pitta person is going to thrive on a lot of brainstorming, strategic thinking. And a vata is going to they'll be very much platitudes, right? Their wording will be very platitudes. There's not a lot of focus and direction. You have to kind of accept what their gifts and energy is in the mix, and then try to create a team and an approach that lets everybody bring the best of themselves to it.
Excellent.
If that
Thank
makes
you.
sense.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Lynne. Does anyone else have any more questions for Lynne before we start to wrap up? Because we are getting towards the time at which we'll be closing down. I think somebody's come in to get a book. That's fine. Nathan, Jerry, I think Lynne is still here.
Yeah, no, I was just reflecting on the when you're talking about balance, again, going back to the type model and the way in which the sort of stress stuff, where the fourth function, if we don't invest in it in the right way, it will play up, it'll bite us. So that if I as an INTJ preference, if I don't invest in my sensing, particularly my extroverted sensing, in the right way, then when I get under pressure, I'll just eat too much, drink too much, watch too much TV, kind of slump into bad use of sensing. So it sounded very similar to that.
Yeah, and I think, one of the interesting things in Ayurveda is if you're approaching life in a fairly balanced way, you won't have cravings. You'll have intuitive choices that you'll make, but you won't have those intense cravings that are maybe trying to, solve for an emotional place that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think we're probably going to have to start drawing this to a close.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for the chat. Really fantastic to hear from all of you. I've learned a lot from you guys as well. And thank you, Catherine.
Well, I can't thank you enough. And at the start, before we started, Lynne said to me, "Oh, it's only going to be about 45 minutes." And I think the fact that, we've been so interested and Lynne's covered so much ground is amazing. And I liked at the beginning, she said, the question for us is, are we creating a lifestyle that honours our constitution? And I think she's given us so much material to go away and think about how we are running our own lives and how well that fits our constitution, or our temperament in our language. I think it's been fantastic. And I'm sure we're going to be doing some of those quizzes. So thank you ever so much. We're really grateful. I'm going to ask you, Lynne, if you could just stop sharing your screen, because I've got one slide I'd like to share, which is just really a reminder to people. So can you see that slide? Right, okay, because I can't see it, so that's good. This is just a reminder to people about our upcoming events. Another webinar next month on personality disorder, our type practitioner peer support group, which is an opportunity for you to bring your questions about type or coaching and working with your clients along to Sarah Perrott, our president. Conversation with Roy Childs in January, and of course the online conference in April and the in-person experience in June in London. Really looking forward to all of those. So thank you for listening, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.